really chuffed to be joined on Not the Andrew Marr Show by Halima Khan, who is the former chair of Labour Party's BAME staff, Network and Governance and Legal Unit staff from 2019 to 2022. And as most of us would know her, a whistleblower on Labour Files, the Al Jazeera documentary that we all watched avidly and rewatched and shared all over the place. How are you doing, Halima?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I think this conversation's been long overdue, and I can only apologize for not reaching out earlier, but thank you for having me.
Well, it's great that you've come on at all, because I can't really imagine how difficult it must have been for you, having been thrust into the limelight with the Labour Files documentary as a whistleblower. You must have had quite a bit of trouble after that. Without getting into any problems legally or anything else, what has it been like for you since when that happened, when that documentary came out? What happened after that?
As soon as the Labour Files documentary released a few weeks later, the Labour Party sent the second largest law firm in the world to kind of threaten a dawn raid at my house with a court injunction on trying to take all my technology, essentially. So at that stage in my life, I was just very much isolated, where I didn't have any kind of external solidarity, but the kind of legal issues that I was facing, I wasn't able to really speak about. I still am not able to talk, entirely about the scope of what the legal case entails. There's a legal case that they have against me, and then there's a legal case that I have against them, which is, two separate matters. Mine being my employment tribunal for race discrimination and unlawful dismissal. When I had spoken to a few journalists, who wanted to, kind of backdoor more information on the corruption and, firsthand accounts, I'd asked them why, these were Guardian journalists. I'd asked them, okay, but why am I not being approached to give an opinion piece or even actually directly give you information? And they said that essentially the Labour Party had sent legal letters to mainstream media to not speak to me, explicitly don't speak to Halima Khan. So, these things makes you feel incredibly isolated and suffocated when it's like, wow, these large organizations have kind of completely blacklisted and shadow banned you. After the documentary release, I was also completely sidelined and unsupported by Al Jazeera, who decided, they also, I presume, also got some legal letters based on the Labour Files documentary. So how they decided to respond was completely distance themselves from me and not offer any kind of support in any which way. So that was kind of like the position that I was stuck in, where I was fighting these big legal cases, then having no support, be it from politicians, be it from journalists, be it from, pretty much anybody. And then obviously a few months after the Labour Files released, there was the Owen Jones, Tommy Robinson kind of thing that had occurred, which I found very interesting, because Owen Jones, being a big journalist with millions of followers, at that time I still wasn't, the Labour Files didn't really pick up, and I didn't really have that many followers. So for him to come and find my tweet, to go and, attack me on it and all of that. After that, suddenly then Times Radio and all these other mainstream media outlets started to contact me to speak on Owen Jones and Tommy Robinson, right? And at that time, my mental health was quite chaotic. It was everywhere, because obviously I'd been shafted and, kind of squashed and silenced by many, many different people. But also, the fact that I had this massive pylon where people were attacking me, and it was people from all sorts, who I've never even met or heard of. People from Henry Jackson Society, as well as people on the left that claim to be on the left, and then people on the right. So I was getting attacked by all sides. But interestingly enough, what I found very interesting was, like I said, the angle of the mainstream media wanting to interview me at that conjecture. So what I believed was they wanted to target me and get me on camera for 5, 10 minutes on Times Radio or whatever. It was very clear as day that it was used as a tool to discredit me for everything else that I've done, which would then also benefit the big legal case that I have if they were able to succeed to get me to say things or admit things that, I may have not been prepared to do so. So for that reason, I kind of rejected any form of other interviews because it wasn't to do with the Labour Files. It was never to do with the Labour Files. It was always to do with other less, other controversial issues that may impact my case.
So how did you cope with that? What did you do to cope with all that pressure?
I mean, I really coped very badly for a whole year after the Labour Files released. Obviously, I was struggling financially, still am struggling financially. It takes a toll on your mental health when it's already not very good. And then you're financially not being able to do anything. You're kind of like trapped indoors because I developed a lot of social anxiety as well, where I was just too afraid to go out because I'd have instances which I didn't really expect because, like I said, I didn't expect that people had watched the Labour Files at all, really. So then when I'd be out and about and then random people would approach me and be like, oh, I know you, and then ask me political questions while I'm just at the gym or
No.
trying to just trying to actually help my own mental health. Those kind of things. Again, I'm very fortunate that it was in good faith and people were generally supportive, but it caused a kind of anxiety because I am still completely by myself. It's not that I have, a point of call where I could, if anything happens, or I'm like, okay, this is a serious issue, I need some assistance or whatever. So basically, essentially, um, last June was supposed to be my tribunal, but I had it postponed. It went beyond my instruction. And these are lawyers that were introduced to me through Al Jazeera. So they went beyond my instruction, and then I started legally representing myself. So when I was legally representing myself, I just knew that I couldn't do it here in the UK, that I was just struggling so much mentally that, when I felt so unsupported, that it was my friend's wedding that kind of pushed me to leave the UK for a bit and work on my legal case from abroad. So my friend is from Janine and she got married and their wedding was very beautiful. It was essentially she married a man from Nazareth, so it was like a reunification type of wedding where these two people fell in love who live across the apartheid wall essentially with two different IDs and all of those things.
Right.
So
I mean, they've got to have paperwork to get from one to the other. It's kind of like that, isn't it? They have checkpoints to get through different towns, don't they, in the West Bank?
to be honest, it was much of a miracle that the wedding was actually something that happened. That her family were able to get the permits to go into the Israeli territories to have the wedding. So essentially, in September, I took the decision to go to Palestine to go to my friend's wedding. And I was there for a few weeks. And then, as you know, October the 7th happened.
Wow.
Uh, when the war broke out, I just felt that, I was there for a reason. I felt that this is a big test of my character and who I am, whether or not that if I am who I say I am and who I believe to be, that was me being tested on who I was. So it was very easy for me to decide that no, I'm going to stay. And if I actually want to show solidarity to the Palestinian cause, there is no better way than being there when everybody else had left, essentially. So, as insane as it sounds, to deal with my mental health, I ended up in an active war zone, which actually really recalibrated a lot of issues that I had in my mind or my mental health and all of that. And I think sometimes, the most extreme things happen to you for you to have a real shakeup that actually I'm very fortunate,
Mm.
despite all of the suffocation and everything that I felt, that actually I still can do something. I can still make an impact despite, being told or being made to feel that I haven't been able to do so, or, silenced from doing so, per se. So I ended up staying until just before Christmas. I got back to the UK, and it kind of re-energized the fight, because before I'd went to Palestine with all the legal stuff, I got to a point where I felt like giving up, and it wasn't just giving up on the politics side of it and everything like that. It was definitely more on just it was giving up as a whole, really, to be honest. My mental health was very, very bad, and yeah, I think, like I said, everything happens for a reason. Had I not taken that decision to go there for an escape, I don't think I'd be in a position where I'm able to talk to you about the last few years of my life either.
So you came back just before Christmas to the UK. So what did you think about the way that people in this country were talking about Palestine? I mean, obviously we had demonstrations, a lot of big demonstrations here, but the political class, and I'm kind of more interested in what you think about Labour on this. So what do you think about Labour's response to it? Were you surprised by Labour's response to what had happened in the bombing and the genocide of Gaza?
That was actually one of the biggest anxieties about coming back, was, how far removed from the realities of what's happening on the ground are the politicians, are the journalists, are the commentators on this issue. And the fact that they've made something like genocide, a political issue where it's like about factions and camps, that you're either one side or the other, is absolutely disgusting, and is they've cheapened something which is so horrific and so, horrendous. Like, we've seen recently with what has happened with Diane Abbott, where, they don't support Diane Abbott, but they're using the racism that she faced for political points. That's exactly what they've always done on the Palestine issue as well. When majority of the Labour politicians are, associated or actually are Labour friends of Israel, the response is just absolutely unsurprising. And I think that, my kind of gripe with certain Labour politicians or, councillors who have stepped down or whatever, is that I believe that they always knew that this would be the response. They always knew. Again, it was exposed in the Labour files that this is the
Right.
direction that the Labour Party is going. And what brings to question is why did it take for this long, for, where Keir Starmer has been leader for 4 years and he will stand as the leader of the Labour Party in the general election? Why did it take you this long to go and try and, go against him and go against the policies of the Labour Party, when you knew from the very beginning? It was one of the first things he did when he became Labour leader, was bring in Asaf Kaplan, who was a former Israeli spy, straight into headquarters, into Lotto. So, that was one of the first things he did as soon as he became Labour leader. These kind of things, it'd be absolutely outrageous if Keir Starmer or any political party hired, let's say, a Irish spy, a former Irish spy, or, a former French spy, or anybody. But when it came down to him having an Israeli spy, it was just something that everyone just blocked their ears and blocked their eyes to, and no one wanted to have a discussion or even hold him to account. It's absolutely outrageous that that was something that's happened. So, when this has been the way he's maneuvered, and, the specific role that Asaf Kaplan had was a social listener. At that time, when he was hired, that job post, essentially, whenever there was a job post in the Labour Party, it would go out internally, then it would go out externally. But there was no internal or external advert for that role. We were just suddenly told we've got a new member of staff in this position. So that role was created for him. That role didn't exist before before Keir Starmer became leader, and it still doesn't exist now. It was essentially, he was there for 6 months as a social listener, then he vanished. We were never able to, it was almost implicit that you weren't able to ask, what is a social listener? What is the role of a social listener? And that's working inside. And again, these things were common knowledge. You know, when he worked in the leader of the opposition's office, then he was based in parliament. So the parliamentary MPs all knew that there was an Israeli spy working for Starmer, essentially. So these kind of things where it's like, okay, well, the fact that you waited this long and you know, you've stepped down now, you've been talking vocally now, it just makes me think that, you know, why now? Is it because you know that this is something, that a position that's untenable by the members and the members of the public that put you in those positions, you know,
Right.
that they will be unforgiving. So for you to save face for the people that voted you in, you're going to have to take a position, you know.
Mm.
And I think that it's entirely motivated by, you know, not entirely, but for some, it is motivated by careerism. And I think that's the most disappointing thing, because if these people spoke out 2 years ago, perhaps there would have been a leadership election. And perhaps Starmer wouldn't have been, you know, our next prime minister as he is now. You know, that when we had time to cause a fuss, nobody did. And now where there's no time, you know, it's almost like, well, what is the point? You know, you were going to be shafted out eventually anyways. You should have known that.
So, I mean, the Islamophobia, you just mentioned it in the Labour Files. There was that whole section on the Islamophobia within Newham. I mean, that's something that hasn't really been mentioned at all since, as far as I can see. Within the Labour Party, there's a lot of evidence of Islamophobia. With Diane Abbott's the racism from the Tory donor and Labour trying to capitalise on it. I mean, how hypocritical do you feel Labour are on this racism issue?
Well, I mean, I don't think that they're very much, I don't think it's an issue about being hypocritical, to be honest. I think, to be honest and frank with you, that, you know, women of color, specifically women of color, have been a scapegoat anyways for a lot of issues in the Labour Party for a very, very long time. When we take the issue of Rupa Huck, for example, she was suspended, you know, on the day of the Hierarchy of Racism episode coming out with the Labour Files, right? And she was suspended for a comment she made about Kwarteng, essentially saying that he was superficially black. Yes, what she said was poorly worded and inappropriate, but what she meant to say, I believe what she meant to see, is something that we colloquially use as people of color as a coconut, essentially.
Mm.
So the fact that you know, she was suspended on that, then Kate Ossamore was suspended on calling a spade, essentially saying, speaking about the genocide on Gaza, and then with Diane Abbott's continued suspension, um, there's a list of MPs that we were explicitly told not to touch. There was a number of MPs in the Labour Party that have hundreds, if not thousands, of complaints against them, and we were always told that we're not authorised to investigate them. Now, these MPs include Steve Reed, Margaret Hodge, Rosie Duffield, a number of, you know, these right-wing Zionist MPs that that we were never allowed to investigate, and they had, you know, allegations of all sorts, including bullying and harassment, which directly impact individuals who they have to interact with. Now, the fact that at a drop of a hair, almost immediately, they're able to suspend Rupa Huck, Diane Abbott, Kate Ossamore, you know, their suspensions came immediately. It wasn't something that you had to, you know, wait months. I mean, look, no action has been taken on any of the other MPs that I've mentioned at all, you know. So the fact that how Diane Abbott's been treated, and, you know, I think this is a long-standing issue with the Labour Party anyways, that has existed for a very long time. And it's part and parcel of this anti-Semitism crisis that's been going on for a very long time as well. you know, with a lot of the dossiers that we were given by, you know, lobbies and individuals, and, you know, there'd be a lot of anonymous profiles and a lot of people that were targeted for anti-Semitism. Majority of them were Muslim communities and Black communities and people of color. Majority of the people we expelled from the party and kicked out were people of color, left-wing Jews, and, you know, people from Muslim communities. So that is how the Labour Party operates. It serves a specific class of people first and foremost. You know, it serves a middle and upper class group of people, a segment of society, not so much grassroots working class um, people. But yeah, like, you know, the Diane's treatment is just something, you know, that's not new. It's something that, you know, unfortunately was kind of expected, especially with this new leadership that we've had for the last 4 years. You only need to
Did
go.
you, did you see the comment about Doreen Lawrence saying that Keir Starmer hasn't listened to her? It's kind of leaked from a meeting. Do you think that there's truth in that? I mean, do you think he just doesn't listen to people on racism who are Black?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not just that there's not just truth in that. So, for example, you know, when the Black Lives Matter protests happened with George Floyd, you know, the leaked report was also something that was released just a few months before you know, the BLM protests were going through the whole world, essentially. At that time, you know, the BAME Staff Network, we had submitted a number of things, including inquiry, which then ended up being a Ford inquiry, you know, a number of other things that they needed to put in place. Keir Starmer initially, obviously, then, you know, was like, absolutely, we'll do everything. We're going to do this review with Doreen Lawrence and all these things. Then immediately, without informing us, he did a little video where he's talking about all of the great things he's going to do to tackle the racism and all of that. He made a number of promises to us that, okay, well, the issues are serious within the Labour Party, and it's having a wider impact on the parliamentarians, as well as, you know, then by extension, the wider public. He made promises to us that he would meet with us every quarter. He's only met with us twice. He met with us twice. Once because he needed kind of like a buffer for the controversy of the leaked report, and the second time because of the Black Lives Matter protests, he needed to give a response back to you know, the public. Yes, I've met with these people and all of those things. Then he vanished completely. There was nothing else that he, you know, got involved with. All those promises and everything. I believe that the Doreen Lawrence review and all the other things, you know, including the anti-Black racism definition, Islamophobia, and all of those things, it was never intended to actually resolve any issues. Rather, it was there just to show the public as, you know, we're doing something on these matters. For example, we can go back to the Ford inquiry. When the Ford inquiry actually happened, you know, he said, we're doing all this inquiry on it. But then when the findings released, he didn't speak to Martin Ford. There was no communication with Martin Ford and the leadership of the Labour Party. He never spoke about it. He never fulfilled any of the recommendations. And essentially, the mainstream media kind of helped, uh, you know, bury the Ford inquiry and in his benefit. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it just sounds like he's full of whatever you call it, full of something. So look, you've you've gone through quite a traumatic experience over the past few years, but I'm really pleased to see that you're actually making music after all this. I mean, it's quite an incredible thing. I didn't know that you were doing this. Did people know that you were doing this during the time at the Labour Party, or was that something you kept?
I always talk about my time at the Labour Party and how I kind of like survived through it, because, you know, you have to be very measured in speech, because when you're working in the Labour Party again with these ghouls, They're always constantly waiting for you to slip up, to put daggers in your back, essentially. And when I'd have to go into these big meetings with, David Evans or Starmer or anybody else, where I'd have to really, stand and hold the line, essentially. The way I would be able to contain my rage would be just before I'd go into the meetings, I'd have a little freestyle, have a cigarette and a little freestyle, and like
Wow.
diss them in my little bars outside, or like, then I'll come into the meeting, say what I need to say. If there was things that I really wanted to say, like my rage, and I just wanted to say, oh, it's off or anything like that, then after the meetings, I'd rap a little bit and then I'd be
All
fine to
right. Well, look, I'm going to play a bit of your a clip from you of what you've done, and then people can see it, and then I'll just talk after that. I'll just play it now.
Murder on the land, there's blood on our hands. Say the word and you get hanged. We in a world that they had planned. Murder on the land, there's blood on our hands. Say the word and you get hanged. We in a world that they had planned. Tell me, wonder why at times it feels so lonely. They can't control me. If only we could change their minds and how they see us. Maybe they'll free us.
So you sing as well as freestyle. So how long have you been freestyling? I mean, I thought I was quite good at that when I was a teenager, but
then
I've
we're gonna
lost
have to do a collab, Crispin. We're gonna have to do a collaboration.
Yeah,
But
when did you start in doing it? Have you been into the music for a long time? What got you into it? Who are your favorite artists?
I have, one of my favorite artists is probably Jay-Z, actually, to be honest. I think he's an American rapper. So Jay-Z is definitely one of
Yeah.
my favorite artists. I like J. Cole and, a few other American kind of rappers. I don't, unfortunately, I haven't really listened to too much UK rap, I have to be honest, but I listen to a lot of French and Dutch rap as well, and a lot of Arabic rap, though I don't really understand the language. It's more kind of hearing the flow and the sound and the rage and that kind of stuff and how they convey it. But yeah, no, for me, I kind of always use it as a tool of, you know, about dealing with mental health issues since I was young. But to actually record songs, I actually never recorded a song before I got suspended. So when I got suspended from the Labour Party, and then I had started deciding that I was going to Whistleblower, and the Al Jazeera project had began, I had an inclination that much of what I was going to say wasn't going to be portrayed in the Labour Files. And the other inclination that I had was that, what if the younger generation don't hear, or don't watch the Labour Files, but they need to know? For me, it was always about protecting and safeguarding the younger generation. I feel like the reason why I whistleblew to begin with was, I knew that I wasn't going to destroy the machine, or,
Mm.
cause any kind of like, big change, but I want to lay the first brick, essentially, for the people who will come after me. That, again, by example of, I'm not going to be silenced. I'm not signing an NDA. I will take them to court all the way, even if I have to do it by myself without support. I kind of wanted to, show the younger generation that there is another way. And incorporating music with that was actually another avenue where I thought, as so happened where, the younger generation don't know what the Labour Files is, I recorded a whole EP when I went to Palestine the first time. So, the track that you played was one of the first tracks, but there was a number of other tracks that I recorded in Palestine as well. But for legal reasons, they won't be released until after my tribunal in the summer, but they will be released. And then there's a separate EP based on the
Have
second
you
track.
have you got your own recording studio sort of thing? How do you get these down onto record? How do you record them and make the music? Because I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that when I went off to Palestine, I met a lot of people who were just like, who is this strange girl traveling by herself, not with any organization or anything? And I kind of like threw myself into you know, traveling through Palestine, you know, taking up whatever opportunities that were there. When people invited me, yes, I'll come, whatever. I was just the yes man. I was just very happy to be there. So I ended up meeting a lot of rappers and producers. And when I just talked about my story and who I am, essentially everybody, you know, that I've met in the music industry have been very, very warm. And I guess that's what's mitigated my kind of like isolation from the political and, you know, the media storm. It's mitigated it because I've had a lot of solidarity from musicians, producers who are happy to, you know, give me space in their studio, or actually
Wow.
pushing me into the studio saying, Halima, no, do it, it's good, like let's do it together, essentially. So that's basically where I've had you know, had the access, essentially, which has been beautiful. And for me, creativity is something that's very close to my heart. And to know that there is that strong sense of solidarity from creatives. And I think creative people generally hate any kind of limitations that are put on you, whether it's like political, societal, or anything like that. So it is something that's very liberating.